Hello. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Donald Trump and abortion and punishment for women who have abortions. So last week, Donald Trump, who is a Republican presidential candidate for the President of the United States, was in a town hall with Chris Matthews on MSNBC. And Chris Matthews was pressing Donald Trump as to whether or not he should want to ban that procedure and asking how he might enforce such a thing. And Donald Trump says, you go back to a position like they had where they would perhaps go to illegal places, but you have to ban it. Essentially, he says, you have to ban it. And then Chris Matthews put him in a position by asking him a yes or no question, essentially saying, do you support punishment for women who have abortions, yes or no? Now, Donald Trump says, essentially, there has to be some sort of punishment. So, that's kind of what happened. There was a lot of media controversy about it, and he ended up having to recant or to take back his statement and modify it. So, I think to me, it's more of a jumping off point to look at a couple of things. Like, what happened in that moment, and what does it mean for the state of abortion in America? So the first thing I want to talk about is when you're a politician and you're on national TV, I think a lot of times you see it happen where somebody asks you a question and says answer yes or no. And to me, almost all of those feel like it's set up to be a trap. In this particular situation, Chris Matthews wants to get him on the record, wants to make him say either A, I support punishing women, which will make women who don't want to be punished upset. B, I don't support punishing women, in which case the people who want abortion to be illegal in this country will be upset. Or C, do you feel like he's dodging the question, in which case he's subject to criticism about not being the kind of person who could give straight answers. And one of the things that he's shown in this campaign is that he gives unpopular, but usually relatively direct answers. So I think that it's a little bit of a trap anyway. But if we were to look at the underlying issue, like his answer was, I think you have to have some kind of punishment. I think that seemed like that was an honest answer. Maybe he didn't have time to consider it. Maybe he was talking off the top of his head. But if we break it down and we look at kind of the questions that are underlying, the first question is going to be how you feel about abortion, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. And I'm going to use those terms because those are probably the terms that the people who are part of those thought groups will use to describe themselves. Now, we'll handle the pro-choice first because it'll probably be the easiest one. If you're pro-choice, you think that either A, it's not a human life at conception, or B, that it should be legal regardless, or C, that it's a woman's body and therefore her choice, or some combination of all or the above, or something else that says essentially government's place is not to tell women and doctors that they cannot perform this procedure. So therefore, any punishment to women who have an abortion, you would see as a horrible thing. And abortion being illegal, you would see as a horrible thing. I'm sure that there is some amount of change or difference in the extent to which it should be legal, whether it should be available free on demand, or whether you should have it if you could afford for it, whether it should be paid for by Medicare and Medicaid or public money or not. But essentially, you think abortion should be illegal and a woman and or doctor should make the choice. So that kind of sets that whatever Donald Trump would say about whether you should make it illegal and punish it or illegal and not punish it, probably not being illegal would probably be how they would come down on it. Secondarily, if you are in that other group where you are pro-life, then probably you would think that abortion should be illegal, and therefore, if you're going to think it's illegal, there probably should be no reason for it to be illegal in name only. For example, if you have a speed limit and that speed limit's 45, but you're not going to get a ticket until you are at 54, 9 miles an hour over, then is the speed limit really 45 or is the speed limit 54? In the same way, if you make it illegal to have an abortion, but there is no consequence to it being illegal, it's like saying it's illegal, okay, you got me, so what's the punishment? Punishment is nothing. Therefore, there's no point in it being illegal except to make one group of people feel good and one group of people feel bad. And I'm sure that there are people who that would be the perfect solution for them. The third group of people are the ones who say it's a life, it's murder, and because it's murder, it should be punished like murder, or to some lesser degree, but still punished. And for those people, I don't know why it would be in any way surprising that they would take the position that if a woman goes in and instigates an abortion by going to a doctor and saying that she wants one, that she should be less guilty than the doctor who performed it. Because the doctor did not go out on the street and go find women who are pregnant and convince them to have an abortion. Even now, the women who choose to have abortions, they go into Planned Parenthood or other clinics, or they go into their OBGYN, or they go through something where they initiate that process. So if you say it's a crime to commit an abortion, you would think that the woman who was having the abortion would be an accessory before the fact or after the fact, or she would be funding the crime. In some way, she is associated with that. Which is not to say that my opinion is it should be legal or illegal. It's just to say once that you say that it's illegal, I would find it very strange to say I think abortion should be illegal and then turn around and say, hey, it should be illegal, but there should be no punishment. Wink, wink. That doesn't do anybody. Now, I would say this as well. I don't think that there was political will to say, okay, you're going to do 15 years to life because you had an abortion. I think at most you could probably get there to be a fine or some kind of sanction like that. I mean, if you're really kind of out there in the theoretical or thinking about what would be a way that you could stop people from having abortions, if that's your goal, then you could even do something like put somebody on house arrest for a number of months, like 6 months, say that, which would be the time from when you usually know you had a baby around the second or third month, you know you're pregnant, to when you conceive or something, and then you take away, oh, well, I don't want to be inconvenienced by being pregnant for next 6 months, so I'm going to get rid of it. But I think that point of view that women have abortions because it's convenient, it might happen in some cases, but generally it's a bit of a facile argument that people would have elective surgery just because it might be fun or more convenient than taking a couple pills. I think a lot of times what happens is people think that they're going to take their chances because they're special, and then they find out that they're not special, and then they panic and they do what they do to get rid of that. I think my general opinion is that people will tend to take the best possible decision that's available to them, that they're aware of from their point of view. And if a woman is having an abortion, it's probably because she's looked at, or maybe she's not thinking clearly, but she looks at her choices and says that's the best possible way. If you want to reduce the number of abortions, then instead of making abortion worse, maybe you could make her other options better. Find ways to help and support and to give her other choices. I think that I've seen a lot of instances where people say the woman should just have the baby and give it up for adoption without saying we're going to provide any kind of support for that to happen. But I think that when we go to the idea of making things illegal and creating punishments for it, then we're saying I want the government to step in and take over and choose to make something harder for somebody else so that I don't have to be inconvenienced to try and make it better for someone else. And some people will say to that, well, why should I make it better for somebody else? They made the choice, therefore they would be responsible. And the reason is because it is legal to have an abortion right now. Therefore, they have the choice to have an abortion. Therefore, if you don't want them to take that choice, you have to provide them with an alternative that's better than the choices they currently have available when they chose to have the abortion. So I think, regardless of what that you think about abortion and life and things like that, I think the political will doesn't exist to send women to prison for having an abortion. I think if it is legal, women will choose to have abortion in some numbers as long as that's their best option. And if you want it to be pro-life, the easiest way to do that without running afoul of the pro-choice people is to give women that are pregnant and in bad situations better situations. I think what happened last week was not so much a question of having a discussion about the merits of the case. It was people who've already made their decision getting fuel with which to take somebody who had a different opinion and paint them as a monster. And in all fairness, I don't know Mr. Trump, so he may well be a monster. I don't think he appeared to be that way. I think if you're asking how do you solve the problem of women having abortions, sending them to prison when they have an abortion would be a way to solve it. I think it's a price that's a little high. And I think there are more reasonable approaches, like doing things to help women who are pregnant so they will choose not to have an abortion. Seems to me a way of protecting the life and protecting the choice, giving people better choices. I don't know necessarily how to do that, but I think that it probably is a way that everybody can get behind. If you're pro-choice, hey, giving pregnant mothers more and better choices would be a good idea. If you're pro-life, giving pregnant women a better choices so that they don't have abortions would be a good idea. Seems like it works for everybody. So at the end of the day, I think that it's not a simple question of what Donald Trump thinks. It's what do we want to do as a country going forward? And do we want to do anything? Maybe leaving things the way they are is the best way. I tend to be anti-authoritarian generally. If there's a spectrum, I think I'm more on the anti-authoritarian. Not quite anarchist, but I'm certainly not authoritarian. So I think that having people have the legal access to have abortions is a good idea because it forces the people who don't want them to have abortions to give them better choices. Personally, I think with regard to abortions, I would never want to have them. So I would tend not to want to have sexual relations with somebody with whom I wouldn't want to have a child. Now, some people might say, well, if you only want to have sex with people who you want to have a child with, you're not going to have sex with a lot of people. But the other way to look at it is you have sex with somebody and you have a baby with them, then you're hooked with them forever. So why do that with somebody who you're hooked to forever? And if you're willing to be hooked to them forever, then maybe you might consider doing that before you have babies with them. But that's my opinion. And the great thing about being an American is you don't have to follow it. You have your choices. Right now it's legal. You can have birth control. You can have abortions. You can have abstinence. You can do any or all of those things. But I think it's a little disingenuous if you would be against any regulation of abortion to say that the particular one that he chose was so egregious and monstrous when nothing would be acceptable to you. I think he was a politician. He was caught in a trap. He answered the question honestly. And he's paying for it. And maybe that's how it should be. But then don't complain that politicians don't answer questions. That's all I have. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Thanks, and have a wonderful day.